All right, so we'll go ahead and get started. Good morning, everyone. My name is Shei Shambore, and we will begin with today's webinar on what's new in flexible modeling in Creo 4.0. So just by way of, I guess, housekeeping to get these items out of the way, I'll mention a couple of things regarding GoToMeeting. First off, this session is being recorded, so if you have any questions about whether it's recorded and if you're going to get access to the content later on, yes, this is being recorded and we will upload it to our YouTube page and probably email out a link to all attendees as well. Next is there's a questions pane or panel in your GoToWebinar pane on the right-hand side. It's usually a gray strip of I guess commands, and if it's currently collapsed, you can click on a tiny red arrow to expand it, and you'll see the questions pane in there. But for this webinar, we will not be muting or unmuting anyone. I guess everyone is muted by default, and so if you have any questions, you can type them into that questions pane on the GoToWebinar control panel. Those will come over here to our staff, and we will answer them either during the webinar live, or if we can't get to them, or if it requires more a more lengthy response, we will follow up with the person who asked the question after the webinar. Cool. So that being said, we'll go ahead and dive into this here. So today we're going to be talking about what's new in flexible modeling inside of Creo 4.0, and so we're going to touch on a few highlights on the software and what's new in it. But before we do that, we'll just start off by way of introduction. So we are Boundary Systems. We are a product development and consulting company based out of Cleveland, Ohio, but really we have a reach that expands beyond that. And we have many different capabilities, but really the goal is that we try to find the best solutions for whatever product development challenges our customers face. And we do that by partnering with specific software vendors that offer different solutions to those technical challenges. And so for us, we just don't, push software, but we rather offer solutions to technical or design challenges, be it in the area of, data management or CAD design and consulting or simulation. We are here to ensure that we're a resource for our customers and clients in whatever design challenges they face. And you just have the customary brag slide that says you grew very, very fast in a short amount of time. And again, I guess this also, goes to show that that we are, well respected in our field for what we do, and we've been getting our customers a lot of success and meeting a lot of solutions that they, or I guess meeting a lot of needs that they have, and hence the accolades as well. All right, so we'll dive straight into the meat of the content here. So what's new in flexible modeling? So these are a few of the highlights of some of the new features and functions inside of flex modeling. First off is that you have the Mini Toolbar inside of Creo 4 in flex modeling. And if you're not familiar with the Mini Toolbar, it's you'll see it when we get into the demo portion of things. It's a small strip of commands that basically pulls out the most context-sensitive items you need right at your fingertips, depending on what you currently have selected. If you've used any Microsoft Office product, say for example Microsoft Word, if you've used it in the last couple of years, and anytime you highlight the text, for example, you get a small toolbar that pops up right above your mouse and then has a strip of commands that's asking you, do you want to change the font? Do you want to make it bold, italics, or underline? Do you want to change the size of your font or things like that, right? So common formatting items are pulled right in front of your mouse right there, so that way you can easily access those without having to travel to the top of the ribbon. That is essentially what the Mini Toolbar is right now inside of Creo 4. So with flexible modeling, it makes your design much easier, right? Because it reduces mouse travel. It ensures that you're focused exactly on your design and not, moving back and forth, to access or look for commands, we'll say. And then also by way of that, which I actually didn't mention it up here, but I'll address it with shape selection tools. Flexible modeling in Creo 4 now comes with a new selection paradigm, just like regular part modeling does, in where I think in old school flex modeling, usually it would change your selection filter to a geometry filter, where it could pick anything from surfaces to edges to points. But in reality, a lot of what you did, a huge amount of the tasks you did in flex modeling were surface related. And so it would always be frustrating whenever you want to pick a surface on your geometry and it's always highlighting edges or points. Well, in Creo 4, they've switched the selection paradigm around a little bit, and now inside of flexible modeling, once you get in there, the default selection is surfaces and surface regions. And so it makes it much easier for you to just select something and be immediately productive without having to spend a couple seconds, moving your mouse around and trying to make sure you query select or you pre-highlight the right item before you select it, right? And then that then goes into shape selection tools as well. The geometry selection tools that are added inside of Creo 4 have been enhanced from prior versions, and so this gives you a lot more flexibility to specify the kind of geometry you want to select as the software scans the entire geometry. You can pick the kind of feature you want to select, the dimensions, the concavity or convexity, if they're planar or coplanar, or coaxial. You can specify all of those things, and the software will automatically scan the geometry, find that for you, and it's just a one-click button to select that. And then the additional benefit there is you can also then save those queries as well. So that way, say for example, you frequently simplify or use flexible modeling on a certain design component that your company has, right? Now, for each new release of product, there's a new component, there's a new part number, but for the most part, the design methodology and the geometry are somewhat similar, right? In a case like that, you can save some of the flexible modeling queries that you use to select geometry. You can save those to a file. So that way, next time around, whenever you're simplifying or you're working with that geometry, instead of having to manually spec out those selection criteria, you can just read in whatever saved query file you already have, and in that case, it'll automatically select those items for you. And again, you can be that much more productive, without having to spend time manually selecting things. And so really the goal or the aim is more on efficiency and improving the speed of you being able to create your designs and then just run with it, right? So a couple other enhancements inside of Flex Modeling are some move enhancements. So first off, with the move tool, historically you had a case where whenever you're moving with constraints specifically, in prior versions of flexible modeling, you always had to specify all the constraints that were necessary in order to fully, fix a feature that you were moving in 3D space, sort of similar to how you would have done it if you were assembling a component. But now inside of Creo 4, they've removed that restriction of full definition, I'll say. So in other words, if all I need is one constraint to locate the position of a particular geometry, and I don't need any other constraints, in that case, I can just go ahead and say, okay, I'm done, and I can create my flexible modeling feature. I'm not forced to continue adding multiple constraints until I can define one point in 3D space where that geometry must lie, right? And so again, that makes you that much more flexible with manipulating geometry. You can specify exactly what you want in much less time, and then you can hit OK and continue designing other things. So again, the aim is on efficiency and ease of use, and you being able to speed up your designs. All right, the next aspect is also regarding move as well, is they've enhanced the move when it comes to moving datums. So prior to this, you could only move datums if you had some geometry to move as well, right? Well, what happens in the case where you just want to move a datum plane or an axis based on some specified criteria without having to move the, without having to move any geometry, right? Now you can do that because they've removed the limitation on only moving datums whenever you're moving geometry, right? And then some other enhancements as well. So, for example, you have some pattern enhancements. So, for example, they've removed, it's now easier for you to tweak your patterns inside of flexible modeling. And specifically, what I mean by that is, if you're creating a pattern of multiple features, or you're recognizing a pattern, you have the option to restrict a change from propagating to specific pattern members, right? So if I have a pattern, A, B, C, D, E, F, instances, and I'm creating a change on instance B, I can deselect instance, D, for example, from receiving that change. So that way, everything else but D gets whatever geometry change I'm putting in there. All right, the next part of this here is also that, and this for me is incredibly huge. You don't know how happy this made me when I saw this, is that flexible modeling is now integrated into sheet metal. And so it's, man, this is just incredible. And I'll tell you why this is incredible, because with flexible modeling, sometimes you use it for, they'll say late stage design changes. But usually, so the way you would use it for how do you say it? Simplifying geometry for other, I don't want to say non-design specific tasks. For example, like simulation, right? So doing a CAE analysis is an easy example, and I do that a lot here. My simulation model is not going to be going to our PDM system as our full or final design model, right? Now, some insights from that may go in there, but not my, simulation model. And so usually I like to use flexible modeling to defeature, a model, especially when the design didn't come or start from me. I'm getting a coworker's design or a customer's design, right, in a consulting environment. Sometimes it comes as a step file or a dumb solid, and I can't edit the underlying geometry or features. And other times it comes in as a Creo model, but I look at the model tree and, it's 200 features long, and I instantly get scared to even edit any geometry, right? Because you change one feature and like 10 child features fail underneath that, right? Well, in a case like that, flexible modeling is always my go-to for simplifying those. But it's never existed in sheet metal, right? And so if you had a sheet metal part, Creo 3 and older, and you wanted to use flex modeling, you were stuck. You couldn't. You had to use the normal editing tools to tweak the geometry. But now it's in sheet metal, right? And so it makes it that much easier to use, that much sweeter to just, simplify your sheet metal geometry without having to bother about, editing the native Creo features, right? The other thing about sheet metal is that it also is intelligent enough to respect sheet metal specific rules. So for example, it's not going to, edit the geometry and give you an object that doesn't have a constant wall thickness, for example, because that's one of the implied things behind sheet metal is you must have a constant wall thickness throughout, right? And so those are some of the highlights of what's new inside of flexible modeling in Creo. At this point, I'll pause here and we'll switch over to a demo portion of things where I'll pull out the software and show some examples of what I just talked about. So we'll hang tight here while I switch screens and we'll continue along. All right then. Yep. That was a rather lengthy screen switching process, but we're good to go. So right now I'm in Creo 4. We're going to work with, well, we'll start off with this concept design right here. This isn't anything real in reality. I think it's just a concept design for an off-road, sort of like a tanker vehicle, right? Now in this case here, first thing I'll do is I'll just pull my Creo 4 into full screen mode. If you haven't seen this before, we have a webinar on what's new in Creo 4. One of the sweet things about it is you can get your model into full screen mode, so that way you're maximizing your screen real estate, right? And I can see my geometry as large as possible, right? All right. So first off here, we'll start off with let's see here. I'll start off with the shape selection tools. So say for example, we'll pick on this this component over here. We'll open that guy, and in this case here, so this is just a link, right, with some holes. And say for example, I want to simplify this for, you know, some other task I want to do down the line. Say for example, just to use in a simulation, for example, right? Yeah, so I can pull out my shape selection tools, and I could either go to the ribbon, and under flex modeling, that's under here under geometry search, right? I can also access the same tools by pressing Shift F as well, and I get to the same command. And in this case, it's completely revamped, so that way you can basically specify what exactly it is you want to select or search for. Anything from, you know, chamfers to planar surfaces to round surfaces. And then this shape surfaces here is whatever specific shape you select using the shape selection tools in Flex Modeling, right? I can click over here to add whatever search criteria I want, and this search criteria is dependent on what you're looking for, so it's context sensitive, right? So for example, if I, you know, am looking for cylindrical surfaces, then all of a sudden it now pulls in values here for, you know, radii, and, you know, do I want to look for convex or concave cylindrical surfaces, right? And this geometry tool command now also supports, well, not also, it supports object action workflow or action object workflow, right? So in other words, I could select something, start the geometry tool, and that selected item is going to be the seed or the basis for my selection, or I can start the tool and then select something, right? So for example, in this case, I could start off and, you know, select an item. And now the software automatically reads in the properties of that geometry or that surface into the geometry search tool, and now it shows me here, okay, you know, I'll add your search criteria based on what you've already selected. So let's look for, you know, all geometry where it's a cylindrical surface with a radius of 0.125 and it's concave, right? Now, if this is all I want, I could go ahead and hit search. If I had more criteria to add, I could pick over here and then add, you know, add more criteria, right? I could say just search for any, this whatever it is there with any radius. I could do a combination of the two. I could say, you know, greater than or equal to a certain value and less than or equal to a certain value. So this would be within a certain range, right? So, you know, for example, between, you know, 0.1 and say, you know, 0.13 or something, right? Or I could also in here, you know, look, for example, add coaxial surfaces for it to find any coaxial surfaces if that's what I'm interested in, right? So I can do all of that from just, you know, picking in here and specifying what my search parameters are, right? So in this case, we'll go ahead and we'll say, let's close this guy. I just want to have this guy over here, and we'll say, you know, yeah, anything that's, you know, radius of 0.125, we'll go ahead and search, right? It finds all these other, holes in here that I didn't manually select, but it finds all of them, right? Now I have a couple things. I could either just save, I could either hit select in here, right, to add those to the selection, and then I could perform whatever action I want on them, or I can save this as well. So I can pick over here and save query to file, right? So now if this is a design that is similar from model to model to model, right? I know that in a few months or maybe a year from now, I'm going to see this similar design in a new model that our company produces, right? It's going to have similar dimensions, right? And I'm going to have to simplify it the same way. Instead of having to manually select it each time, I can save that query to a file, right? So that way, the next time around, I just load that existing query. It pre-populates the entire geometry search toolbox, and I could just go ahead and continue with my product, with being productive, basically, right? So in this case, I'll hit select, pick on all those guys, and now I can then perform whatever action I want to on them, right? Now, the other thing you'll notice is the Mini Toolbar now exists for within flexible modeling, right? And so the Mini Toolbar, pulls out the frequently used or common or easy to use commands to your fingertips, right? So I no longer have to travel to my ribbon, right? Have it expand, and then go look for my remove button if I want to remove that, all those holes, right? My remove button is right over here, right? And again, this Mini Toolbar, just so you know, is also customizable as well. So if it's something where you say, there's another command that I always use very often, and I want to have that right over here at my fingertips as well. Yeah, it's absolutely customizable. I think we did a webinar on what's new in Creo 4, and one of the things we mentioned was the customization of the Mini Toolbar. So you can go to our YouTube page and take a look at that. In this case, we'll just go ahead and hit remove over here, and yeah, and that's it. We're done, right? So I'll close this here, and we'll switch to a different model and continue along. So in this case here, say I'll pick on this this sheet metal piece that's right underneath that camera over there. And yeah, so as you can see over here, this is a sheet metal piece, right? So I have sheet metal commands like, flat or flange or things like that. And again, the beauty of this is I can pick on the flexible modeling tab right inside of my sheet metal part. This makes me so giddy you can't even imagine, right? And just as normal sheet metal, you still have your, typical flexible modeling tools like your move or your offset or your transform, right, or your substitute, right? You still have your modify analytic, for example, pattern recognition tools and things like that. But you also have some sheet metal specific objects now, right? For example, your pull wall and edit bend, right, commands. In cases where you have bend or corner reliefs that are specific to your sheet metal model, you can edit those as well right from within this section over here, as well as editing rounds and chamfers, right? And so and the other thing about this is the sheet metal the flexible modeling embedded into sheet metal is also intelligent as well and respects sheet metal specific rules. So for example, if I want to pull this wall and extend it, say I want to test out a design variant. What if we extend this out by a 1/4 inch, right? I can do that, and you'll notice it still retains my constant wall thickness, right? It moves the adjacent walls plus this bend along with it as well, right? I don't get a 1/4 inch thicker wall over here than over on the other side, right? I can also simply edit bends, for example, and just go ahead with this and say, for example, I want to see what this is like at a 60-degree bend, right? You can easily do that. And yeah, easily set that up, right? And so Now this makes modifying sheet metal pieces much easier to use. It's much easier to do or perform. And again, just like normal, I can still pick on whatever geometry I have, and say if I want to move them, I could go ahead and just initiate my free move, and there you go. What if you move that hole over here? Yeah, you can do that quite easily, right? And so this is just incredible stuff, and I can't wait to to get on a design with this on a customer model, because then I know with sheet metal my hands aren't tied anymore, right? I can just whip out flex modeling and get along with it. All right, the final piece I'll mention over here with regards to Creo 4 is going to be the improvements when it comes to patterning and some move enhancements as well. So we'll switch out of this guy and come to this other part over here, and yeah. So first off, we'll say actually no. So first off, we'll say in this case, say for example, we want to move all these parts over here, right? So all these tabs at the end. So first off, we'll just go ahead and first we'll get into flex modeling, pick on that, and say you want to select the entire boss. Yeah. Okay, and so first off here, what I'll do is I will do a pattern recognition, just so that way flex modeling understands that that's a pattern with 4 instances, right? And then we'll combine a couple of these enhancements together. So say for example, I want to move the entire boss. I should also select inside as well. Yeah, entire boss, including the hole in the middle. I want to move that, right? So we'll go ahead and initiate our move command, right? And in this case, we're going to use our move by constraints, right? Define the feature using constraints. And in our move by constraints, I'll pull out this dialog box so that way you see it. This is basically very similar to you moving inside of an assembly, right? If you were going to assemble a component, right, and you're picking different constraints to constrain it, this is basically very similar conceptually. The only difference is instead of assembling an entire part, in this case, I'm assembling, quote unquote, a selection of geometry, in this case, some surface geometry, right? And so in this case, I'll go ahead and pick my constraints. Say, for example, I want to specify, that distance, right, between those two surfaces, right? Say I want that to be, 15, right? We'll pull that up like that. Prior to this, in old school sheet metal, in old school flex modeling, I could not hit the OK button, right? It says I'm partially constrained. I still had to add more constraints. I still had to fully constrain this piece, right? Well, what if, for purposes of my design, this is all I want to do? This is all I care about, right? If I want to hit OK, there we go. That's it. I'm okay. I can continue to do what else I want to do, right? And so this again makes it much easier for me to just get on with my design, and then I'm done, and I don't have to worry about adding more constraints just because I need to get this thing done, right? The other enhancement about this is we'll say, for example, I want to specify a pattern feature as well, so that way it propagates as well, right? So I'll pick in this case on the pattern recognition feature that I created, and in this case, flex modeling says, okay, yeah, I think I recognize all those 4 entities, right, that you want to propagate the pattern to. Now I can easily tell it, hey, don't propagate it to that one, right? Exclude this item over here. Just propagate it to all the others. Also, exclude this guy over here on the left as well, right? Pass it on to the others, right? Now I hit OK, and I have both of these guys that respect that change because they're propagated to them, and then both of these guys that are not, right? So this gives me a lot more design flexibility in how I can propagate a change to different members, right? And so that covers it by way of what we're gonna, of what some of the different improvements are that are specific to sheet metal. At this point, sorry, not sheet metal, that are specific to flex modeling inside of Creo 4. At this point, we'll switch over and dive into some questions and answers over here. We'll switch this guy. All right, so yep, we just went through the demo piece, and so at this point, if you guys have any questions, write them in the questions pane of the GoToWebinar control panel. I'll pull this out and we'll go ahead and take a look at some of the questions that have already been popped in there. All right. Well, first question in here is, will there be a demo of this software? And yeah, the answer is yes. As I just went through, I think that question probably came in right before I did the demo. Next question over here. What did the model tree look like after you edited the link? Oh, I believe. Oh, yes, I understand that question. So after I edited the link, let me switch to Creo here, and I'll show you what's going on. All right. So I'll switch back to my link. I'll come over here. Yep, that's my link. Yeah, so what did the model tree look like? This is how it looked like. So we have this remove feature, which is my flexible modeling remove feature in there, right? And I think what the person may actually be sort of getting at is how flexible modeling impacts your design. And there's also another question that's sort of similar to that, which I'll probably address both of those together, is, let's see here, let me pull out the question again. All right, yeah, so there's also another question here that asks, can this be used to modify imported geometry? So for both of those, we've done a few webinars already on flexible modeling. So you can go to our YouTube page and search for those to get more the full context of this. But yeah, just a Cliff Notes answer. Your model tree looks the way it is because flexible modeling doesn't modify the existing base geometry as much as it adds a feature on top of whatever else is already there, right? So I'm selecting geometry and I'm just adding a feature-based edit to that particular geometry, right? So this then means that flexible modeling doesn't really care about my model tree history or my parent-child relationships or how my part was modeled before I get to this point, right? All flex modeling cares about is, give me a geometry, I'll modify that, I'll give you a feature in your model tree, so that way if you want to edit it after the fact, if you want to delete or suppress that feature and get back to the original, you can do that. But yeah, in this case, I can just pick whatever geometry I want and then go ahead and modify, right? Which also then speaks to the question about imported geometry. Yes, and absolutely yes. Flexible modeling will work on imported geometry. So step files, parasolids, as long as you have geometry. So bosses, cuts, holes, rounds, chamfers, as long as you have any kind of solid geometry, flexible modeling will work and you can modify them with flex modeling. And again, for me personally, that's one of the reasons why I love it, is because with simulation, for example, which I do a lot of here, we don't always get the benefit of getting Creo files from our customers, right? Sometimes it comes as a step file, sometimes they send us a SolidWorks file, right? but I can still open that in Creo, and as long as it has geometry, absolutely I can modify that any day, anytime. All right. So another couple questions that came in here regarding flex modeling and the license. So sort of, first question is, is the flexible modeling extension required to continue modifying the file once it's been modified? Or another question says, basically an expansion of the prior question. Once the remove feature is part of my model tree, would I need the extension in order to edit it any further? Or what if I didn't have the extension? And then another question that's related to that, do you need a license of flex modeling to open a flex model modified file? And so I think these are all hitting on very similar themes, so I'll address those. In general, the way Creo works is if I want to add a feature that is enabled by a specific extension, or I want to modify or edit a feature that's enabled by a specific extension, I have to have that extension in session, right? So in this case, if I wanted to add this remove feature or remove a particular piece of geometry, I have to have that flex modeling, extension, in my session, right? Now, if I'm opening a part, right, or I receive a part from someone, it already has flex modeling features in it, and I'm not changing or modifying anything about it at all. All I'm doing is I'm opening it to say, okay, here it is, and I'm going to go do something else with it, right? In that case, I don't have to have the flexible modeling license or extension. Creo will open and retain the geometry as long as it knows, as long as I'm not modifying or adding any flex modeling entities to it. And so that way, if, me and my coworkers are short on flex modeling licenses, and I didn't have a flex model license, if I'm not adding a new feature or editing an existing flex model feature, I really don't need a license, right? I should be good to go with just continuing along with my design. All right, let's see if there are any other questions here. All right, so I think the same asker also asked for some clarification. So they're asking, so does that mean that if you did not need to edit the feature that was created from the flex modeling license, you could still edit other aspects of the model? And the answer for that would be yes. Yeah. So I could, if I wanted to, edit, the extrude over here, for example, right? I could go ahead and edit that, without impact to, my flex modeling feature, for example, right? Yeah. So let's see. Looks like the questions have slowed down over here. So we'll go ahead and yep. So we'll go. Yeah, it looks like the questions have slowed down here. So we'll go ahead and end the webinar at this point. If you have any other questions or comments, my contact information is going to be up on the screen in a second here. I'm going to pull that out so that way you can see that. Don't hesitate to reach out to us with any questions or concerns you have. Once again, my name is Shaish Ambore. I've been walking you through today's webinar, and it's been a complete joy and pleasure to do that. Again, reach out to us if you have any questions or comments, and again, come join us next week on a future edition of Boundaries Webinar Wednesdays. Thanks a lot, and we will talk to you soon.